The Iron Tide. The biomechanical leviathans of the Nexeri Empire moved through space like living nightmares. Each warship pulsed with organic energy, their hulls breathing with the rhythm of a massive heart. Tendrils of living metal writhed across their surfaces, while eyes the size of buildings tracked potential prey across the void. At the center of this terrifying armada, the flagship Devourer of Stars stretched over 3 kilometers long. Its consciousness merged with that of War Marshal Xanthos. Xanthos felt every sensation his ship experienced. The taste of stellar radiation on its hull, the hunger for fresh metal to consume, the anticipation of another easy conquest. His 4 arms manipulated bioneural interfaces that connected directly to his nervous system, making him one with the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Through the ship's thousands of sensory organs, he watched the Celestian homeworld burn below. The Celestians had been a peaceful species, their crystal cities reflecting sunlight like scattered diamonds across their blue-green world. They had sent diplomatic messages, offering trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Their mistake had been believing that negotiation was possible with the Nexeri. Now their floating garden cities crashed into the oceans, and their harmonious songs have been replaced by the silence of extinction. "Another world claims," whispered Commander Vorth, his voice a mixture of organic sounds and mechanical clicks. The Nexeri had long ago abandoned purely biological forms, instead merging their consciousness with living machines. The Celestian Defense Fleet lasted 47 minutes. Their energy harmonics proved insufficient against our biodisruptors. Xanthos nodded, feeling satisfaction pulse through the ship's neural networks. The biodisruptors were the Nexeri's greatest weapon, capable of turning any technology against its creators. Enemy ships would find their own systems attacking them from within, as Nexeri bioviruses corrupted their control mechanisms. No species had ever found a defense against this assault. "Status on fleet consumption?" Xanthos asked, his words traveling through the ship's nervous system. "The feeding is proceeding efficiently," Vorth replied. Through the main viewing organs, they watched as smaller Nexeri vessels extended tentacle-like appendages toward the wreckage of Celestian ships. The biomechanical creatures literally consumed the defeated fleet, breaking down the metal and technology into raw materials that were then integrated into their own hulls. With each conquest, the Nexeri fleet grew stronger. The process was both beautiful and horrifying. Crystalline Celestian vessels, once works of art that danced through space on wings of pure energy, were now being dissolved and absorbed. Their pilots had tried to surrender, broadcasting peaceful surrender codes in 17 different languages. The Nexeri had ignored them all. Mercy was not part of their programming. "Bring up the conquest records," Xanthos commanded. The ship's biocomputer interfaced directly with his mind, flooding his consciousness with data. In the past cycle alone, they had conquered 43 star systems. The proud Drachmuth warrior clans had fallen in 18 hours, their ceremonial combat codes no match for biodisruptor swarms. The technology-dependent Cynthians had lasted 3 days before their own artificial intelligences turned against them, infected by Nexeri bioviruses. Each victory followed the same pattern. Initial contact and demands for surrender, followed by desperate resistance that always failed within hours or days. The galaxy's species had grown soft, dependent on their technology, and unprepared for an enemy that could turn their greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. No race had ever managed to damage a Nexeri ship significantly, let alone destroy one. War Marshal interrupted navigation specialist Kith, her biomechanical form plugged directly into the ship's sensor array. Long-range scouts report an interesting discovery, a small system on the outer rim, inhabited by a previously unknown species. The tactical display materialized in Xanthos's mind, showing a yellow star with several planets. The third planet glowed with the distinctive energy signatures of industrial civilization. "What do we know about them?" "They call themselves humans," Kith reported, her voice carrying notes of amusement. "Primitive chemical rockets, basic nuclear technology, crude radio communications. They appear to have only recently achieved interplanetary travel. Our scouts detected a small mining colony on the fourth planet. Xanthos felt the ship's interest spike. New species were always entertaining, especially primitive ones. Their desperate struggles and crude weapons provided valuable combat data while requiring minimal effort to subdue. Military capabilities. Laughably basic, Commander Vorth interjected, his mechanical systems processing the scout data. Metal projectile weapons, chemical explosives, primitive fusion reactors. They have perhaps 24 spacecraft total, mostly converted cargo vessels. No energy shields, no quantum processors, no biotechnology whatsoever. The bridge crew's biomechanical forms chittered with what passed for laughter among the Nexari. A species without biotechnology facing the Nexari Empire was like bacteria challenging a star. Set course for the human system, Xanthos ordered. This should provide adequate recreation for the fleet. As the massive armada changed direction, the Nexari ships communicated through bioneural networks, sharing anticipation and hunger. The smaller vessels, hungry after consuming the Celestian fleet, yearned for fresh metal to devour. The warriors looked forward to testing new combat scenarios against primitive defenses. The biocomputers began calculating optimal deployment patterns for maximum psychological impact. Hours passed as they traveled through hyperspace, the biomechanical vessels riding currents of twisted space-time like living creatures swimming through cosmic oceans. When they emerged at the edge of the human system, the sight that greeted them confirmed their expectations of an easy conquest. The system was indeed primitive. Ancient radio signals leaked from the third planet, carrying crude entertainment broadcasts and chaotic news reports. A few automated probes drifted between planets, their nuclear power sources flickering like dying candles compared to Nexari bioreactors. The mining colony on the fourth planet operated with equipment that the Nexari had abandoned millennia ago. Analysis confirms initial reports, Kith announced. Single inhabited planet, population approximately 8 billion. Their largest space-based installation appears to be a research station near their moon. No defensive satellites, no energy barriers, no fleet deployment detected. Xanthos began the standard conquest protocol. Open communications channel. Deliver the ultimatum. His words traveled through the ship's nervous system and out through bioacoustic transmitters that could broadcast across multiple frequencies simultaneously. Primitive humans of the Sol system. His voice echoed across space, carrying undertones of inevitable doom. You are now subjects of the Nexari Empire. You have one standard time unit to surrender your military forces and submit to imperial authority. Resistance will result in total extinction. The response came faster than expected, carried on primitive radio waves. A calm human voice answered, speaking in clear, precise tones. This is Director Elena Rodriguez of the Sol Defense Coordination Center. Your ultimatum is rejected. Leave our system immediately or face the consequences. The biomechanical bridge erupted in organic laughter. Several crew members had to stabilize themselves as their systems processed the absurdity of the situation. A species that had barely achieved fusion power was threatening the conquerors of 43 star systems. Director Rodriguez, Xanthos replied, allowing amusement to color his bioacoustic transmission. Perhaps you do not understand your situation. We have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Your primitive technology cannot harm our vessels. Surrender now, and your species will be permitted to exist as workers for the Empire. We understand perfectly, came the response. You're the ones who destroyed the Celestians and the Drachmath. We've been monitoring your progress for quite some time. Our answer remains the same. Leave now. Xanthos felt confusion ripple through his ship's consciousness. How could these primitives know about previous conquests? Their technology barely allowed faster-than-light communication, let alone long-range surveillance of galactic events. You claim to have monitored our campaigns. Impossible. Your civilization lacks the capability for such observation. You'd be surprised what we're capable of, Director Rodriguez replied. Final warning. War Marshal Xanthos, turn your fleet around and leave. We don't want to fight you, but we will if necessary. The use of his name sent shockwaves through the bioneural networks. No enemy had ever identified him personally before engaging in battle. The Nexari kept their command structure secret, using bio-encrypted communications that no known technology could decode. Yet somehow, these primitive humans knew exactly who they were facing. Impossible, Commander Vorth whispered, his biomechanical form trembling with confusion. Our communications are organic quantum encrypted. No species has ever broken our security protocols. Through the ship's sensory organs, Xanthos watched a single point of light separate itself from the inner system and begin approaching their position. The vessel was roughly wedge-shaped, constructed from what appeared to be primitive metal alloys with angular surfaces that looked crude compared to the flowing organic lines of Nexari bioships. Single vessel approaching, Kith reported. Configuration unknown. Energy signature minimal. Estimated length 800 meters. No biotechnology detected. One ship. Xanthos asked, his forearms tensing against the bioneural interfaces. They're sending one primitive vessel against our entire armada. The human ship continued its steady approach, showing no signs of fear or hesitation. As it drew closer, Nexari sensors revealed more details about their opponent. The hull appeared to be constructed from titanium steel alloys, with strange geometric patterns etched across its surface. Weapon ports were visible, but energy readings suggested simple kinetic systems rather than advanced energy weapons. It's like watching an insect challenge a hurricane, observed Commander Vorth. They can't possibly believe they have any chance of victory. A new transmission came from the approaching vessel. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiant. War Marshal Xanthos, you've made a serious mistake coming here. This is your absolute final chance to withdraw. Xanthos had heard enough. These humans clearly didn't understand the futility of their situation. Perhaps a demonstration would help them grasp reality. Target the human vessel, he commanded. Single biodisruptor pulse. Let's show them what happens to those who challenge the Nexari Empire. The ship's bioweapon systems responded to his neural commands. Organic cannons along the hull's surface dilated like enormous eyes, focusing biodisruptor energy into a concentrated beam. The weapon fired, sending a pulse of corrupting energy that would infiltrate the human ship's systems and turn their own technology against them. The biodisruptor beam struck the UEA's Defiant directly amidships. Xanthos expected to see the familiar sight of enemy systems going haywire, weapons firing on their own crew, life support failing catastrophically. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The geometric patterns on the human ship's hull suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The biodisruptor energy, instead of penetrating the vessel's systems, was somehow absorbed and redirected. The beam that should have destroyed the ship was instead channeled harmlessly away, dissipating into space like water flowing off stone. The Nexari bridge fell completely silent. For the first time in their conquest of the galaxy, a biodisruptor had failed to affect its target. The impossibility of what they had witnessed sent shockwaves through every bioneural network on the ship. Weapon malfunction. Xanthos asked quietly, though his ship's diagnostics were already confirming that all systems had fired perfectly. All systems nominal, Vorth whispered. The biodisruptor fired at full power. Energy transfer was complete. But somehow, Captain Chen's voice cut through their confusion with unsettling calm. Surprised, War Marshal? You shouldn't be. We've had 3 years to prepare for this moment. 3 years to study your weapons, your tactics, your weaknesses. Did you really think the entire galaxy would just roll over and die without learning anything? Xanthos felt his ship's consciousness recoil in confusion. 3 years? How could these primitives have known about the Nexari for 3 years when first contact had occurred only minutes ago? Impossible, he snarled through the bioacoustic transmitters. Your species lacks the technology for long-range surveillance. You couldn't have monitored our campaigns. Chen's laugh carried a dangerous edge. Who said anything about surveillance, War Marshal? When you destroyed the Celestian Federation, not every ship was completely vaporized. A few survivors made it to our space. They brought us wreckage, data, and most importantly, warnings about what was coming. The revelation hit the Nexari like a physical blow. Survivors. The bioweapons were designed to leave no witnesses, no chance for intelligence to spread. Yet somehow, some Celestians had escaped and reached these humans with information about Nexari capabilities. The Celestians shared everything they knew about your biodisruptors, Chen continued. Our best scientists spent 3 years developing countermeasures. We built quantum computers specifically to model your weapons. We tested thousands of material combinations. The hull you just fired at is embedded with quantum coherence fields that redirect bioenergy rather than allowing it to penetrate. Xanthos felt something he had never experienced before, genuine uncertainty. If these humans had truly mastered defenses against biodisruptors, then the Nexari's greatest advantage had become worthless. But surely it was impossible. They were primitives, barely capable of fusion power. You're lying, Commander Vorth transmitted. Your species lacks the scientific knowledge to understand bioquantum mechanics at that level. Are we? Chen's voice remained maddeningly calm. There's one way to find out. Why don't you try hitting us with everything you've got? The price of underestimation. War Marshal Xanthos felt his biomechanical ship's consciousness surge with wounded pride and anger. No primitive species had ever spoken to the Nexari with such confidence, and certainly none had successfully resisted their biodisruptors. Captain Chen's challenge hung in the void between them like a thrown gauntlet. All vessels, attack formation Gamma, Xanthos commanded through the neural networks. Concentrated biodisruptor barrage. I want that human ship reduced to its component atoms. 50 Nexari warships moved into position, their organic hulls pulsing with anticipation. Each vessel was a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering, capable of reducing entire fleets to scrap metal. Together, they represented enough firepower to sterilize a continent. The bioweapons along their hulls dilated like massive eyes, focusing destructive energy that had never failed to overwhelm any defense. Full barrage, all weapons, Xanthos ordered. Show these primitives the price of defying the Empire. Space around the UEAS Defiant erupted into a storm of biodisruptor energy. 50 concentrated beams of corrupting force lanced out simultaneously, carrying enough power to overwhelm any known defensive system. The energy expenditure was enormous, enough to drain half the fleet's reserves, but the psychological impact would be worth it. The geometric patterns on the Defiant's hull blazed like miniature stars as the barrage struck. Instead of the expected destruction, the human ship seemed to drink in the energy, its quantum coherence fields redirecting every joule of force harmlessly into space. When the bombardment ended, the vessel sat completely unchanged, not even a scorch mark visible on its angular surface. Energy readings are impossible, navigation specialist Kith reported, her biomechanical sensors trembling with confusion. Their hull is actually absorbing our weapon's energy and using it to strengthen their defensive fields. The quantum coherence is creating a feedback loop that makes them stronger with each attack. The Nexari bridge fell into stunned silence. In 3,000 years of conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. Their biodisruptors were supposed to be the ultimate weapon, capable of turning any technology against itself. Yet somehow, these primitive humans had created a defense that made their attacks counterproductive. Kinetic weapons, Commander Vorth suggested desperately. If energy weapons won't work, we'll use physical projectiles. No defense can stop raw momentum. Agreed, Xanthos snarled. Launch biomissiles, full spread. Even if they can redirect energy, they can't stop solid matter. Hundreds of organic projectiles erupted from the Nexari ships, each one a living weapon capable of adapting to enemy defenses. The biomissiles would burrow into the human ship's hull and then release swarms of nanoorganisms designed to consume the vessel from within. Captain Chen's voice cut through their attack preparations with unsettling calm. Missile launch detected. 40 seconds to impact. Activating point defense systems. The Defiant's hull suddenly bristled with previously hidden weapons. Dozens of small turrets emerged from concealed ports, their targeting systems locking onto the incoming biomissiles with mechanical precision. Instead of energy weapons, the turrets fired streams of metal projectiles at incredible velocity. Primitive kinetic weapons, Vorth scoffed. Crude metal bullets against our adaptive biomissiles. They can't possibly achieve enough accuracy to. His words died as the human point defense systems demonstrated their true capability. Every single biomissile was intercepted with surgical precision, the hypervelocity projectiles tearing through the organic weapons like paper. The accuracy was impossible, requiring computational power that should have been beyond human technology. How? Kith whispered. The targeting calculations required for that level of precision should be beyond their primitive computers. Captain Chen's explanation came through the communications channel with the same maddening composure. Quantum computers, Specialist Kith. We've been busy during our 3 years of preparation. The Celestians shared more than just information about your weapons. They gave us their entire scientific database. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Nexari fleet. The Celestians had been one of the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, their quantum research centuries ahead of most civilizations. If the humans had access to that knowledge and had spent 3 years improving upon it, then they were far from the primitives the Nexari had assumed. Impossible, Xanthos transmitted. Even with Celestian knowledge, your species lacks the industrial capacity to build advanced quantum systems. Do we? Chen replied. You seem to be making a lot of assumptions about what we can and can't do. When your entire species is facing extinction, you'd be amazed how quickly you can advance. Every nation on Earth contributed resources. Every scientist worked together. Every manufacturing facility was converted to defense production. Through the ship's sensory organs, Xanthos studied the human vessel with new eyes. The angular hull that had appeared primitive now revealed itself as deceptively sophisticated. The geometric patterns weren't decorative. They were functional elements of an advanced quantum coherence system. The weapon ports that had seemed crude were actually precisely engineered for maximum efficiency. You want to know what humans are really capable of? Chen continued. Let me show you. The Defiant's main weapons fired for the first time. Instead of energy beams or exotic weapons, it launched simple tungsten projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The rounds were no bigger than a human fist, but they carried the momentum of freight trains. The first projectile struck the Nexari heavy cruiser Bone Eater directly amidships. The organic hull, designed to absorb and redirect energy, offered no resistance to solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. The tungsten core punched through bioarmor, support structures, and the ship's consciousness core in a single devastating impact. The Bone Eater didn't explode in the traditional sense. The kinetic energy transferred through its biomechanical structure like a shockwave, disrupting the organic systems that held it together. The massive warship simply came apart, its consciousness screaming across the neural networks as it died. 3 more railgun rounds found their targets with impossible accuracy. The cruiser's living death, Void Hunger, and Star Drinker suffered identical fates, their biomechanical forms shredded by impacts they had no defense against. Kinetic weapons, Vorth gasped, his biosystems struggling to process the tactical data. Simple metal projectiles. But the velocity, the accuracy, it should be impossible. Nothing's impossible when you're fighting for survival, Chen replied. We studied every battle you fought, analyzed every tactical pattern. You rely on energy weapons and biotechnology because they've never failed you. But humans have been throwing rocks since we lived in caves. We just learned to throw them really, really fast. Xanthos felt panic creeping through his ship's consciousness for the first time in centuries. 4 heavy cruisers destroyed in as many seconds, and the human vessel showed no signs of damage or depletion. Worse, Long-range sensors were detecting new contacts approaching from the inner system. "Multiple vessels incoming," Kith reported, her voice filled with dread. 15, 20, 30 human ships approaching at maximum burn, all showing similar energy signatures to the lead vessel. Through the tactical display, Xanthos watched a fleet of human warships emerge from hiding positions throughout the solar system. They had been concealed behind asteroids, masked by sensor shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap. The Nexeri, so confident in their superiority, had flown directly into a carefully planned ambush. 30 ships against 3,000. Commander Vorth said, trying to maintain confidence. Even with their weapons, they're still outnumbered 100 to 1. Captain Chen's response carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Numbers aren't everything, Commander. Quality beats quantity when you know exactly what you're facing." The human fleet moved with coordination that spoke of months of practice and preparation. Instead of charging headlong into battle, they maintained formation and fired in coordinated volleys. Each railgun round was perfectly timed to overwhelm Nexeri defensive capabilities, while their quantum coherence hulls rendered biodisruptor attacks completely ineffective. But the humans had one more surprise waiting. As the battle intensified, strange signals began propagating through the Nexeri bioneural networks. At first, they seemed like routine communication static, but Xanthos soon realized something was terribly wrong. "War Marshal," Vorth called out, his biomechanical form convulsing strangely. "Something's interfering with our neural links. The biocomputers are reporting system anomalies." Across the fleet, Nexeri ships began behaving erratically. Weapons fired at random, navigation systems sent vessels into uncontrolled spins, and biomechanical components started attacking their own ships. The same technology that had made the Nexeri unstoppable was turning against them. "Computer virus," Chen explained calmly, "based on Celestian bioquantum algorithms, modified by human programmers who grew up with digital warfare. We've been broadcasting it since the battle began. Your bioneural networks are highly advanced, but they're also vulnerable to properly designed malware." Xanthos felt his own ship's consciousness fragmenting as the virus spread through its systems. The biocomputers that controlled weapons, navigation, and life support began turning against their organic hosts. Ships throughout the fleet were suffering similar fates, their own technology becoming their executioner. "This is impossible," he transmitted through failing communication systems. "Our bioneural networks are quantum encrypted. No known virus could penetrate our defenses." "No known virus created by species who think like you," Chen corrected. "But humans have a different approach to problem solving. We don't try to overwhelm your defenses. We trick them into letting us in. The virus mimics normal bioneural signals until it's already inside your systems." The battle was turning into a massacre, but not the one the Nexeri had expected. Their massive fleet, dependent on biotechnology for everything from weapons to life support, was being systematically destroyed by their own systems. The few ships that managed to maintain control found themselves facing human railgun rounds that their energy-based defenses couldn't stop. "War Marshal," Kith gasped, her biomechanical form sparking with system failures. "The fleet is lost. Over 60% of our vessels are experiencing critical system failures. The remainder are taking heavy damage from human kinetic weapons." Xanthos felt his ship's consciousness screaming in agony as the virus continued its work. The bioneural networks that had made him one with his vessel were now carrying poison throughout both their systems. For the first time in his long life, he faced the possibility of actual defeat. "Retreat," he commanded through failing communication systems. "All surviving vessels. Emergency hyperspace jump. Maximum dispersal pattern." The surviving Nexeri ships, barely a tenth of the original armada, began their emergency withdrawal. Many were too badly damaged to achieve hyperspace, their biodrives corrupted by the human virus. Others managed to escape, but carried the infection with them, spreading chaos throughout Nexeri space. As the battle ended, Captain Chen's voice carried across the void one final time. This message is for any Nexuri forces monitoring this transmission. You came to our system expecting an easy conquest. Instead, you found a species that refuses to surrender. We share our defensive technologies with every surviving civilization in this sector. The age of Nexuri expansion is over. The implications of her words sent terror through Xanthos's failing consciousness. If the humans had shared their quantum coherence technology and biovirus countermeasures with other species, then the entire foundation of Nexuri power was crumbling. Their biodisruptors would be useless, their ships vulnerable to the same viral attacks that had destroyed his fleet. Hours later, as the UES Defiant patrolled the battlefield, Director Rodriguez's voice reached out across space on multiple frequencies. To all civilizations receiving this transmission, this is Elena Rodriguez of the Seoul Defense Coordination Center. The Nexuri threat has been neutralized in our system. We're sharing our defensive technologies freely with any species willing to stand against tyranny. The message was picked up by communication networks throughout the galaxy. On a dozen worlds where survivors had hidden from Nexera conquest, hope flickered to life for the first time in years. The seemingly unstoppable empire had finally met an enemy it couldn't defeat. In the aftermath of the battle, as human rescue ships searched for Nexuri survivors to offer medical aid and prisoner exchange, the galaxy began to understand a new truth. Humanity hadn't won through superior technology or overwhelming force. They had won through preparation, cooperation, and the uniquely human refusal to accept defeat. The Nexuri Empire, built on the assumption that superior technology guaranteed victory, discovered too late that the greatest weapon in the universe was the determination of a species fighting for its survival. In their arrogance, they had given humanity exactly what it needed: 3 years to prepare and a reason to unite against a common threat.